Thaeth, Eresteja was in pain as she dragged herself onto the back of her horse. The broken arrow stuck in her right thigh moved, causing another wave of suffering. The guardian of fire cursed her carelessness. Entering the habitat of the lost and trying to talk to Shikui himself was almost a suicide attempt. Maybe she wanted to take it. After the death of her friend and second guardian of fire, Kay, everything lost its meaning. Only 2 months had passed and she felt as if an entire era had slipped between her fingers. She was constantly on the road, running, taking on the duties of the other guardians. Now she felt what loneliness was. She tried to talk to Shikui, the guru of the lost. Their number and activity has increased alarmingly recently. True be told, lost were the pain in the ass of this world, which after the time of the great longing could not get itself together. In addition, the hunters were lurking in new territories, and their bands of robbers were raiding villages and passers-by. The only opponents to these black ships of humanity were the Brotherhood of the Guardians of the Elements, to which Eresteja belonged. Each of the 4 elements had 2 guardians, a woman and a man. The Brotherhood has decided that instead of futile attempts to kill Lost, it was necessary to try a settlement, without success. Shikui refused to make peace because, as he said, they have killed too many Lost, and their death would not be forgotten. Eresteja ended up running away from them and broke through the wilderness with little vigilance and entered between a gang of hunters, hooked on a branch and fell off the horse before they could reach her. One of them released an arrow, now stuck in her right leg, but she managed to get back on her mount. She galloped off until entered the main road. She tried to put her injured leg in the stirrup, but the pain numbed her with every movement, so she sat still, clenching her teeth. Her eyesight was foggy, fortunately. The sun was high, and the horizon was visible. She remembered this road. Somewhere near her should be the destroyed village. She was at the territory of the Kingdom of Elves. The village was called Thaeth. Yes, she thought, she knew this story. Thaeth, a refuge and place of execution, the royal family of the Second Dynasty. What was her name? Eresteja. The girl they saved and made her watch how her parents and 2 younger brothers die. A sad story. The king's brother, Malawidi, was their tormentor. Eresteja made mental note that Malawidi was her ancestor. He started a new line of the dynasty from which she came. It didn't matter anymore. Old history. She has to get there, because she could no longer stay in the saddle. The village was deserted centuries ago. After a brutal assassination of the royal heads, the inhabitants left the place not wanting to live with a bad memory. Thaeth was different from other villages. Without whitewashed cottages, low fences, stone walls, it looked like a separate part of the forest, shaped like a human residence. The carvings in the wood were marked with an elf writing. Time erased some of them slightly, but still single words could be read. Some of the houses were made up of thick trees, the trunks of which were transformed into residential buildings. The other part was made of planks and logs. A narrow corridor between them led to the center. In the middle there was the Nefertari, the tree of the harvest. Elvish ancestors in old faith planted the Nefertari when establishing new settlements, for a good start, for the blessing of the deities. These trees grew together with the surrounding elven habitat. In autumn they gave birth to blue flowers, in spring to yellow ones. Their leaves were evergreen, but the Nefertari that Eresteja saw before her died. The dried branches were sticking out gloomy. The leaves had fallen down long ago, except for one that strangely clung to the only untried branch. The bark from the trunk peeled off completely, revealing the sign of the horror. The sign of the murder that took place here. Next to the tree was a well. She slipped off from horse's back and, dragging injured leg, dropped a rope with a wooden bucket tied up, in surprisingly good condition, and pulled it back in, spilling some water around. She dipped her face and drank it greedily. She suddenly felt a cold steel blade on her neck. "Don't move, otherwise I'll slit your throat." She followed the order. Wet hair covered her forehead. The blade was still by her throat. "Stand up," said the female voice. She stood up and observed the owner of the dagger, the elf of her height, slim. Her face must have been beautiful in the past, but now the scar, deep cutting through her cheek, disfigured her, giving her a cruel expression. In addition to the scar, she noticed that there was a small mark on her right cheek, the mark of a butterfly. The black eyes stared at her carefully and the strands of blonde hair slid out of the hood of her coat. Her uniform in dark green shade may have deceived potential observers by blending in with the landscape. "Who are you?" the woman asked suspiciously. "A stray wanderer," she answered vaguely, clenching her teeth as she put the weight on her injured leg while getting up. "Who are you?" "I already said that. I ask who you are, and you better answer, because I will not repeat myself," the woman said threateningly. "I am the guardian of fire. My name is Eresteja," she answered obediently. "What are you doing here?" The dagger was still pointed at her. She regretted leaving the gun at the saddle. "I am lost," the guardian whispered, losing her balance. She would fall, but the woman held her firmly. She looked at her leg and led her through narrow passages between the trees to the largest one. She pushed the door in the trunk and led her inside. Eresteja could hardly see anything. She was breathing hard and she lost consciousness. She woke up as she thought after a few moments. She opened her eyes and looked around. She was lying in a soft bed under clean, snow-white duvet. Naked from the waist down, her leg was carefully bandaged. She tried to move it. It pained a little, but she was happy to be able to move. She looked around the room, filled with sunlight coming from an open window. The wooden floor, carefully swept, shone in the sunlight. The bed on which she was placed was carved in a piece of a large log and looked like a big cradle. Next to it, there was a paraffin lamp on the table and a large wardrobe opposite. Behind the ajar door on the left was the smell of roast meat. The door opened and an elf with a mutilated face stood in it. She was wearing a snow-white dress on shoulder straps. She didn't smile. "How do you feel? I took out the arrowhead, but I had to give you a stronger dose of the Adreamer. You slept a little longer than I assumed," she said in a monotone voice. "How long?" Eresteja smiled at her gratefully. "4 days," she added with a slightly apologetic face. That's probably more than during the last 2 months together," she was laughing. The girl's corner of lips trembled. "I will serve dinner right away. I think you should eat something." She rushed out of the room and came back carrying a plate of steaming soup. The guardian ate 2 portions and then spread out comfortably, leaning against the wall behind her back. "Thank you. You saved my life," she said simply. The blonde nodded her head. "I apologize for the dagger. I was just not expecting anyone here." "You live here." "You can say that." There was bitterness in her voice. Eresteja took a look at her. The sadness emanating from the figure in front of her, almost palpable, raised so many questions in the guardian's head. "Who are you? How did you get here? How long have you lived here?" "My name is Eresteja," the girl stated simply after a moment of consideration. "Like that girl from the history of the Elven dynasty?" She was surprised. "That is the name I was given on my birth. I was born in a royal family of the Second Dynasty." The guardian was shaking her head with disbelief. "That is impossible. Even the elves don't last that long. I am Eresteja, the same Eresteja for centuries, and this," she indicated the space outside the window, "is my time loop. I am the marked." There was silence, interrupted only by the chirp of birds outside the window. The guardian's mind, relaxed after a long sleep, could not assimilate the words of a woman. "But how did... You've been marked?" She nodded her head, looking at Eresteja with undivided attention. "This birthmark," she pointed to her right cheek where the butterfly symbol was displayed, "is no ordinary flaw." "Where did you get these? What does all this mean? Marked in the old alphabet was the same as the Yelters, that is." The guardian started thinking loudly. "Cursed," Eresteja ended. "A cursed and essentially wanderer. But let us start from the beginning, from my story. King Fasimani, my father, boasted an old elfic background. The families born before Trumanali, the great tide came from across the sea, from the land to where our souls will return someday." She made a short pause. "The old families died out with time, giving way to successors born in this land. However, Fasimani persisted in the old faith tradition, although some of the rituals required blood and cruelty. Malawidi, his brother, did not accept this and decided to use it against the king. He stirred up the people. We had to flee. We found shelter in Thaeth. Malawidi did not stop searching. He found us and he made me watch my family execution." She interrupted again for a moment, closing her eyes. My mother knew magic. The rest of the magic left over from several generations of her ancestors was enough to cast a spell. Blood against blood. My uncle murdered his own brother. This opened a passage, a path between worlds. Only such great harm, great evil could have done it. My father and brothers were already dead, so the spell struck me as the last of his blood. Malawidi, unable to kill me, disfigured my face. I ran away, or so I thought. A bright trail appeared before me and suddenly I landed in another land of walking shadows. I got scared and wanted to get out, and I ran through other worlds, and the door would close behind me and open another. It seemed to me that it took ages, but eventually I came back here, to Thaeth, and again I stood face to face with Malawidi, as if I hadn't left even for a moment. My uncle, out of fury, had me tied to the Nefertari tree. They drew a horror sign on it, and I sat there, next to the bloody bodies of my loved ones. The people ran away. I begged for help, cried, screamed, nobody stopped. I sat there for 3 days without sleep or food, feeling the stench of decaying corpses. Eventually, I managed to free myself, even though I ripped the skin off my wrists. I wanted to run ahead, but I couldn't. Her face was so sad that Eresteja pitied her. Whenever I thought of being somewhere else, there was a bright trail. I discovered that I could live in those lands where it carried me, in a different form, but always with a mark. And yet I was still here. I buried my family. I collected things left behind by the inhabitants. I lived in this house. The city is my time loop. I discovered this by reading books about old blood rituals in another land. Again, the silence was overdue. The words spoken by the blonde elf were slowly reaching the guardian. She formed images in her head before she spoke. What you said sounds unbelievable, so much so that I have to pinch myself to see if it's not a dream. That's what she did. She roasted her skin but still remained in the same room, and Eresteja looked at her with fatigue. Others did not believe me either. Have you told anyone about this? After all, you said that no one lives here but you. I have talked about it in other worlds, about the possibility of passing between them. Nobody believed it, but in one of the lands I sold the story to one bard and he made it into a pleasant song. You don't even know how far it went and how the bards changed it. Sometimes they talk about me as if I had been abandoned. Lovely girl who was saved from death by the gods by creating an opportunity to wander between worlds. While others made me an eternal wanderer who seeks the particles of his soul scattered throughout the universe. It's very creative, but I still can't believe it. Can we go back to the world we are in? She nodded her head and Eresteja continued. You said Thaeth is a time loop and you can't get out of here. But I'm here now and I must come back to my fraternity? Eresteja was a bit anxious about possibility to stay in this place forever. We will see, the woman replied carefully. The guardian tried not to show her nervousness. If you can't leave town and it's ruined, how are you still alive? How did you survive? Without food? I set up traps around the city. Sometimes something gets caught, a rodent. Sometimes I shoot birds if they get close enough. Unfortunately, I am not a seasoned hunter or shooter, so sometimes I have to bring some food from another world. Can you take something with you, or someone? Eresteja has sighed. Something small that I will hide under my clothes? Yes. Another being? No. Why? Eresteja didn't try to hide her disappointment. According to the books, this is contrary to the law of space-time. Beings, creatures, belong to one world. A passage open to many would disrupt harmony. You know, according to the thinkers, or lunatic wizards theory, others would like to travel constantly. Check other worlds, there would be no constancy. Everywhere is good where we are not, the guardian whispered. Well, you're right. Seeing her unhappy face, Eresteja added, Don't worry, everyone passes through all lands, only in a different way, she explained. How is that? After death, when their days are over in one of them, the guardians of the worlds come for them and take them on to their kingdom. But do they remember anything from the previous life? Eresteja was shocked and skeptical about this idea. Not quite. Sometimes there is an impression, unexplained memories, whose origin we cannot recall. I meet such people. Some remember more, some remember less. So faith in deities is not necessary to get a better life after death? I will not say anything about faith. I know nothing about it. I just suspect that believers like to feel that there is something above them, something that protects, punishes, an explanation for good and evil. They were silent again. When can I leave? Could you unfasten the bandage? I'd like to see my leg, Eresteja pleaded. A shadow has passed through the face of the other elf. She approached the guardian and cut the bandage. Eresteja saw a blinded wound, which was almost impossible, and something that made her even more astonished. In the middle of the wound there was a birthmark, a butterfly, not as clear as on Etienne's cheek, but perfectly recognizable. She looked again into her sad black eyes, expecting answers. I had to bring a cure from another world. Forgive me, but here I had nothing to stop the infection from developing. You had a high fever and strange dark lines that were coming towards your heart. I had no choice. What impact will this have on me? Eresteja whispered, now afraid to hear an answer. She did not respond immediately. I read that you may not be stuck here because you are not bound to this place by anything special, unlike me, but, Etienne said hesitantly, but you may not pass between the lands on the path, but when you pass to another world after death, you will probably remember everything from that land and